Welcome to Boring History for Relaxing Channel. Tonight we step into the wet stone ribs of a winter lighthouse, where the sea claws at the rocks below, the lantern burns above your head, and every gust of wind sounds as if a giant is trying to blow out a birthday candle he was not invited to. You're not simply going to bed tonight. You're trying to sleep inside a tower that exists because ships, storms, and shorelines have never been especially good at polite conversation. And, just to be realistic, if you're a brand new keeper arriving in a violent winter gale with no modern heating, no weather radar, and a long stairway slick with salt damp, you probably won't survive this with your dignity fully intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell us where you are watching from, and your local time, because somewhere out there, someone is relaxing at midnight while you're mentally trimming a lamp wick in a freezing tower. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive near dusk, hunched inside a thick coat that already smells of wet wool, smoke, and the faint metallic tang of salt. The path to the lighthouse is not really a path tonight. It is more of an argument between your boots, the rock, and a great deal of water that was clearly not invited onto land but came anyway. Each step is careful, each breath is sharp. The tower waits ahead, pale and upright against the bruise-coloured sky. His lantern room still dim because the evening duty has not yet begun. The first truth of sleeping in a lighthouse during winter is very simple and mildly rude. You do not sleep when you feel like sleeping. You sleep when the light allows it. For centuries, lighthouse keepers were not romantic silhouettes, standing heroically against the moon every night. They were workers with routines, aching hands, smoky clothes, and a relationship with stairs that could only be described as complicated. In many older lighthouses, the lamp burned oil, and the keeper had to clean glass, polish reflectors, trim wicks, refill reservoirs, and make sure the flame stayed steady. A mainstream historical fact settles quietly into the room with you before electric lights and automation. Lighthouse keepers often had to tend lamps through the night, especially when the light depended on oil flames and carefully maintained lenses. Sleep came in pieces, fitted around duty like scraps of cloth around a drafty window. You push open the heavy door and enter the base of the tower. The sound changes at once. Outside, the storm is a roaring animal. Inside, it becomes a hollow breathing. The walls catch the wind and carry it upward. Water taps, scrapes, and hisses around the stones. Somewhere above, a shutter complains. The whole place smells of oil, salt, rope, coal smoke, old wood, and damp stone that has never once considered being cosy for your convenience. Still, there is order here. There has to be. A lighthouse is not kept by courage alone, which is good, because courage is notoriously bad at polishing brass. The keeper's life depends on repeated tasks, done carefully, in the same way, night after night. You hang your outer coat near the door, though it will not dry so much as pause in its wetness. You check the logbook. You note the hour, the wind direction, the state of the sea, and the visibility, which tonight is somewhere between poor and absolutely theatrical. Up the stairs you go, spiralling slowly, your hand sliding along the rail. The tower narrows your world to stone steps, cold air, and the dull thud of your own boots. You feel the climb in your legs before you've even begun the real work. This, too, is part of how keepers slept. By the time bed became possible, the body was often so tired that even thunder had to make an appointment. At the lantern room, the storm seems to press its face against the glass. The panes are darkening with spray. The metal fittings tremble. Outside, waves burst over the rocks in white flashes, visible whenever the last of the day catches them. You prepare the lamp, not with panic, but with the slow care of someone who understands that panic has poor handwriting and drops things. The wick must be clean, The flame must rise evenly, soot must not gather where it can dim the light. A lamp that smokes too much is not just messy, it is a danger to every vessel hunting for that beam through snow, rain, and black water. Here is a strange little tidbit to keep you company while the wind pinches at the glass. Some keepers became so familiar with their lamps that they could sense trouble by smell. A change in the odour of burning oil, a note of smoke where there should be steadiness, or the dry scent of an overheated fitting could pull them from rest before anything obvious went wrong. Not exactly a glamorous superpower, perhaps, but still better than being known as the person who slept through the lighthouse going dim. That is not the sort of reputation one wants on a tiny island, where everyone already knows how loudly you chew. You light the lamp, and the room changes. Flame gathers, strengthens, steadies. If the lighthouse has a lens, its glass prisms catch the light and fold it into something larger, brighter, almost magical. The great lens does not create the flame. Of course, it organizes it, bends it, sends it outward in a pattern that ships can recognize. The beam sweeps or flashes according to the station's character, the unique rhythm by which mariners know one light from another. It is a kind of coastal heartbeat. And now, only now, may sleep become a subject worth considering. But not yet a promise. You descend again. The stairs turn in beneath you in a slow spiral that makes the storm seem to rotate around the tower. Down below, the living quarters are small and practical. A table, a chair, a stove if the station is fortunate, shelves with supplies, a bunk or narrow bed tucked where it fits. Everything has its place because loose objects in a storm become percussion instruments, and the lighthouse does not need a kitchen orchestra at 3 a.m. Historians still argue whether the greatest burden of lighthouse keeping was the physical labour, the isolation, or the constant responsibility that followed a keeper even into bed. The truth, as you feel it tonight, is probably an unhelpful mixture of all three. The body wants rest. The mind keeps climbing back up the stairs. Is the flame steady? Is the glass clear? Has the wind shifted? Did that sound come from the stove, the door, the lantern, or the sea trying yet again to enter without knocking? You sit on the edge of the bunk and remove one boot, then the other. Your socks are damp at the toes, because winter has a special talent for finding even the smallest weakness in clothing. You wrap yourself in a blanket that smells faintly of smoke and old wool. There is no signance. There is only a hierarchy of noises. The wind moans around the tower. Rain ticks at the windows. Waves strike the rock below with heavy, breath, stopping force. The lantern mechanism overhead may whisper, creak, or click depending on the equipment. Even the walls seem to murmur, holding the cold outside with the grim patience of stone. You learn quickly that lighthouse sleep is not the soft, careless sleep of a person in a quiet inland bedroom. It is guarded sleep, listening sleep, sleep with one ear still employed. You lie down, but some part of you remains standing beside the lamp and watching the flame. The keeper's trick is not to defeat the storm. That would be adorable and also a terrible plan. The trick is to become part of the routine that outlasts it. You let the sounds sort themselves into familiar patterns, the big waves, the smaller spray, the wind in the vents, the occasional rattle that means a shutter is unhappy but not yet dangerous. Your mind begins to label each noise and place it on a shelf. Safe enough, known enough, not pleasant exactly, but ordinary in the way that winter at sea is ordinary, which is to say dramatic and poorly behaved. The lamp is burning, the log is marked, the door is barred, the next check waits ahead in the dark, but for now you are allowed to close your eyes. The tower breathes around you, the sea throws itself against the rocks and fails, then tries again, because the sea has never been praised for learning quickly. Above, the light keeps turning its patient message into the storm. You pull the blanket closer, not because it is especially warm, but because small comforts matter in large weather. Your hands still smell of oil, Your legs ache from the stairs. Your ears keep watch while your thoughts soften. Sleep does not arrive all at once. It comes like a cautious visitor, stepping around puddles, lowering its voice, waiting to see whether the lamp remains steady. And for a little while, with the flame awake above you, you drift. The tower starts breathing harder as the night deepens, as if the storm has found the lighthouse interesting and has decided to lean on it for conversation. You lie still for a few moments, wrapped in wool, hearing the building answer the weather in its own language. Stone does not scream. Stone mutters. Iron brackets click. Wooden doors swell in their frames. Glass trembles in tiny, nervous notes above you. The wind pours around the curve of the tower and makes the whole place hum like a bottle held beneath a waterfall. This is one of the first things you learn when you try to sleep inside a lighthouse during a violent winter storm. The tower is not quiet shelter. It is a musical instrument that the weather plays badly, loudly, and for hours. You feel it through the bunk before you fully hear it. A faint vibration moves through the frame, then through your shoulder, then into your ribs. The lighthouse is built to stand, not to make you feel emotionally supported. Its purpose is to lift the light high and keep it visible. Even when the sea is behaving like a furious laundry tub, many towers are thick at the base, narrowing as they rise, with heavy masonry, cast iron, brick, granite, or concrete depending on place and period. A mainstream historical fact sits firmly beneath you. Famous wave-swept towers such as the Eddystone and Bell Rock lighthouses were engineered with interlocking stones and curved forms so they could resist the force of waves and wind. They were built less like houses and more like upright fortresses with a lamp on top. That sounds reassuring until you are inside one. A fortress still makes noises. You hear the wind strike one side, separate, curl, and rush around the tower in sheets. It does not simply blow past. It presses, tests, and searches. Sometimes it gives a long, smooth moan. Sometimes it delivers a sudden slap against a shutter or vent. And your eyes open in the dark before your thoughts can politely explain that nothing terrible has happened. The tower magnifies small sounds. A loose chain becomes a ghostly clank. A drop of water becomes a cold little clock. A gull, if any bird is foolish enough to be nearby tonight, sounds like a lost soul complaining about customer service. You turn your head on the pillow and listen upward. The lantern room sits at the top like a crown made of glass and metal, noble by daylight, slightly alarming by night. Every gust makes the panes quiver. The vibration travels downward through the ribs of the structure. On some rock lighthouses, waves can strike so hard that spray reaches the lantern windows, even when those windows seem impossibly high above the sea. Keepers in exposed stations sometimes reported stones, fish, seaweed, and even small marine creatures thrown onto galleries by heavy seas. It is a quirky tidbit, but not a comforting one. Imagine waking to find the ocean has delivered a fish to your doorstep like a damp, judgmental newspaper. The tower gives another low shudder. You do not leap up. Not yet. A keeper learns the difference between ordinary movement and dangerous change. That knowledge is not born in a single night. It grows from repetition. The steady creak of the stair rail is harmless. The rhythmic tick from the lamp mechanism is expected. The low boom from the rocks below is the sea striking the foundation. Not the end of civilization, even if it is doing a fine impression. Still, the body has opinions, your muscles tense, your ears widen, somehow. Though ears do not actually do that, sleep becomes a negotiation. The mind says, "This tower has survived many storms." The nerves reply, "Wonderful." But has it survived this particular one while you are personally inside it? You rise because lying still has stopped being restful. The floor is cold enough to feel personal. You step into your boots again, because no one in a winter lighthouse wanders about barefoot unless they are trying to meet regret on intimate terms. The lamp must be checked soon anyway. You take the lantern or candle, shield the flame with your hand, and move toward the stairs. The stairwell coils upward, tight and dim. The storm sounds different here. At the base, it is heavy and muffled. Halfway up, it becomes sharper, full of whistles and rattles. Near the lantern, it is almost alive, and the walls hold the cold, and your breath clouds faintly as you climb. Each step gives you a tiny proof that the building is still whole. Step, stone, rail, breath, step, stone, rail, breath. This simple rhythm steadies you better than any heroic speech could manage. Heroic speeches are difficult to maintain when your nose is running. At a landing, you pause and place your palm against the inner wall. The tower feels damp, but solid. You can sense the force outside without seeing it. Some lighthouses are set on cliffs, some on shorelines, some on reefs or isolated rocks where every delivery of food and coal depends on weather and luck. During winter storms, the keeper is not merely inside a building. You're inside the last fixed point between land and chaos. That sounds grand, yes, but mostly it means the door leaks and everything smells faintly of rope. Historians still argue whether lighthouse architecture should be understood primarily as practical engineering, imperial ambition, coastal community service, or a kind of symbolic battle against nature. Standing in the stairwell at night, you suspect the answer is yes. The tower is technology, warning, shelter, workflows, and stubborn human message. It says, here is danger. It also says, someone is awake. At the top, the lantern room is a world of reflections. The glass panes flash back your small light. The main flame burns steadily inside its apparatus, breathing in a controlled way that contrasts with the wild air beyond. If there is rotating lens, the mechanism may turn with a soft grind or whisper, depending on its age and mood. You inspect what you can. No cracked pane, no serious leak, no choking soak. The storm claws at the outside but remains outside, which is the main standard of success tonight. You wipe a place where moisture gathers near the frame. Saltwater has a talent for becoming everyone's problem. It creeps into hinges, pits metal, clouds glass, stiffens fabric, and leaves its pale crust wherever it can. A sleepy keeper cannot ignore it. If the light is dulled, ships may misread distance or miss the warning entirely. So you wipe, check, listen, and wait for the next gust to prove your nerves are still working. The tower sways, or seems to. Some tall structures do move slightly under force, though in a massive masonry lighthouse the movement may be more felt as vibration than visible motion. Your stomach notices anyway. The glass gives a sharp rattle. You freeze, then hear it settle. Nothing breaks. The lamp remains steady. The beam continues outward through sleet and spray. Calm in a way that feels almost smug. The lamphorn, apparently, is handling the evening better than you are. You descend again, slower this time, not because the danger has vanished, but because you have touched the tower's pulse and found it regular. That is how sleep becomes possible in such a place. Not through silence, not through comfort, through familiarity. A keeper learns the building the way a sailor learns a ship. Every groan has a name, every rattle earns a place in memory. Unknown sounds wake you. Known sounds become part of the mattress. Back in the living quarters, the bunk waits like a narrow treaty. The storm continues its argument with the walls. You remove only what you must, keeping warm layers close because another check will come, and winter enjoys making people dress in the dark. The blanket is heavy on your chest. The sounds above and around you no longer form one giant roar. They separate into pieces, wind at the vents, rain on the small window, sea on rock, metal cooling, flame steady. You breathe with the tower because fighting it would be silly, and you are tired enough to become wise by accident. Inhale as the wind lowers, exhale as it rises. The building hums, the sea booms, Somewhere up in the glass room, the light turns its measured face across the black water. Sleep returns in small, practical fragments. It does not promise dreams. It does not offer softness. It simply settles over you while the lighthouse keeps breathing, and you let the old tower's rough lullaby carry you a little farther into the dark. The bunk is narrow enough to make turning over feel like a scheduled maneuver. You ease yourself onto the thin mattress with the sure careful dignity of someone trying not to knock a knee into the wall, the bed frame, or the small wooden shelf that has been waiting all night to attack your elbow. The room around you is not a bedroom in the modern sense. It's not designed for softness, leisure, or elegant decorative pillows with words stitched on them. It's a place where a human body may be stored horizontally between duties. Still, it is yours for the moment. The quarters smell of damp wool, lamp oil, coal smoke, old timber, and the faint sourness of boots that have endured more weather than any boot should reasonably be asked to endure. A small stove gives off a guarded heat, not enough to make the room warm, exactly, but enough to keep the air from becoming openly hostile. The walls hold the day's cold, the blanket scratches lightly under your chin. Somewhere in the cupboard, a cup shifts with the vibration of another wave striking below. It gives a tiny clink, like a polite warning from the crockery department. You close your eyes, and the room immediately becomes larger in sound. There is the sea, deep and heavy, throwing itself against the rocks in irregular blows. There is the wind, thinner and higher, scraping around the tower and finding every seam. There is the occasional sigh from the stove, the dry tick of contracting metal, the soft creak of the bunk as you adjust your shoulder. In a normal house, these sounds might make you sit up and wonder what has gone wrong. In a lighthouse, they are the bedtime orchestra, and unfortunately the conductor is a storm with no musical training. A mainstream historical fact, gee? Zinter. The darkness, lighthouse keepers often lived in confined quarters attached to or inside the tower, and their domestic lives were shaped by the constant need to maintain the light. In shore stations, the keeper might have a proper dwelling nearby. In exposed rock towers, living space could be squeezed into stacked rooms with storage, kitchen, sleeping area, and service spaces arranged vertically like a very inconvenient layer cake. You do not wander down a hallway to bed. You descend into a pocket of shelter carved out of necessity. You lie still and learn the mattress. Every hollow, every ridge, every place where the straw, wool, or stuffing has formed a private opinion about your spine. Luxury is not present, but routine is. The keeper's body learns where to place a hip, how to fold an arm, how to tuck the blanket so cold air does not slide beneath it like a thief. Rest is a sill here, not a reward. You practice it because you must. The storm makes a sudden booming crash against the outer rock, and the cup in the cupboard clinks again. Your eyes open. Nothing follows. That is important. In a lighthouse, one sound means listen, a second sound may mean rise, a pattern means act. The experienced keeper does not spring from bed at every complaint from the weather, because then no one would sleep at all, and by morning you would be a haunted scarecrow with a logbook. You wait, you count breaths, you let the next wave arrive, lower this time, then another, louder but normal. The structure holds, the lamp above continues, the bed remains a bed, though not a generous one. Sleep comes because exhaustion is stronger than discomfort. Your hands ache from hauling, polishing, trimming, carrying, and gripping cold rails. Your legs are tired from stairs. Your face feels salted. Even your thoughts seem damp at the edges. The body begins to claim what it can. It does not ask for perfect conditions. Perfect conditions are for people who sleep far inland and complain when a refrigerator hums too loudly. You, meanwhile, are attempting to nap inside a vertical stone whistle surrounded by angry water. Perspective is a gift, though not always a pleasant one. A quirky tidbit drifts in with the smell of wool. Some keepers learn to sleep with their clothes partly on, especially in wild weather, so they could rise quickly for a lamp check, a damaged shutter, or a call from another keeper. It was not laziness, it was strategy. Buttons, belts, boots, and freezing fingers are a slow comedy in the dark, and no one wants to lose precious minutes wrestling with a sleeve while the lantern smokes overhead. Sleeping dressed may not feel elegant, but neither does sprinting up stone stairs in underclothes while the sea tries to redecorate the windows. You keep your stockings on, you keep a coat within reach, your boots sit angled beside the bunk, open and ready. The room is arranged for interruption. This is the secret architecture of the keeper's sleep. Not soft pillows or long dreams, but preparedness. A chair placed where you will not trip over it, matches kept dry, a lantern close enough to find by touch. Spare cloth ready for wiping glass or hands. The world may be wild outside, but inside the small room, everything must be findable. Historians still argue whether lighthouse keepers adapted to broken sleep through discipline, necessity, or the simple collapse of the body under repeated fatigue. As you lie there, you suspect there is no clean answer. You are disciplined because you must be. You endure because there is no replacement boat arriving in the middle of a gale. Or you sleep because your body eventually shuts the curtains on your thoughts and says, enough commentary from upstairs. The sound of the storm begins to soften, not because it is quieter, but because your mind stops grabbing every noise by the collar. The roar becomes layered, low thunder from the surf, thin whistling along the stone to rain like thrown sand. The ticking stove. Your own breath. The blanket rises and falls. You are not comfortable in the grand sense, but you are contained. There is a difference, and in winter, contained is sometimes close enough to blessed. You picture the lamp above you, steady and small at its heart, enlarged by glass and sent over the water. You do not need to see it to feel its presence. It shapes the whole tower. It explains the stairs, the damp, the bad mattress, the aching shoulders, the half-dressed sleep, the listening ear. Without that light, this is just a miserable place to spend a storm. With it, the misery has a purpose, which is not nothing. Purpose, annoyingly, can make discomfort almost noble. Almost. A gust strikes so hard that the door to the outer passage gives a dull thump. Your hand moves toward the edge of the bed before you are fully awake. You wait again. The latch holds. The thump does not repeat. You lower your hand. There is a tiny satisfaction in not rising, in knowing enough to remain still. A new keeper might already be halfway across the room, bumping into furniture and inventing new regrets. You simply listen, judge, and stay. The bunk creaks as you shift onto your side. The blanket traps a little more warmth. Your cheek presses into the rough pillow. In this cramped room, sleep is not a deep lake. It is a series of small puddles you step into whenever duty permits. You sink into one now. The storm continues, but farther away somehow, pushed to the edges of awareness. Your last waking thought is not dramatic. It is not about death, destiny, or the romance of the sea. It is that tomorrow, if the weather ever calms, you really should move that shelf before it takes another swing at your elbow. The tower hums, the bunk holds, the light burns on. The first watch of the night does not end with a bell, a cheerful alarm, or a kindly voice saying that it is time to stretch and hydrate. It ends because your body wakes before your mind has finished being asleep, somewhere inside you. A small keeper's clock has been wound by habit, duty, and the deep fear of letting the lamp go untended. Your eyes open into darkness. For a moment, you do not move. You listen. The room is black except for the faintest glow where the stove has settled into embers. The storm keeps pressing against the tower with long, uneven force. Rain scratches at the window. Surf pounds below in heavy intervals. You count the sounds without meaning to. Nothing has changed enough to be alarming, but the hour has arrived. The lamp must be checked. This is how sleep breaks apart in a winter lighthouse. Not neatly, not kindly. It comes in slices, and every slice has duty on both sides. You sit up slowly, because standing too fast in a cold room is a wonderful way to discover that your head has become a weather instrument. The blanket falls away, and the air finds your neck at once. You reach for your coat, your fingers stiff and reluctant. They have a meeting with warmth scheduled for some time in spring. You light a small lantern, shielding the flame until it catches. Its glow opens the room in amber pieces: table, chair, boots, hanging coat, logbook, tin cup, damp floorboards. A mainstream historical fact settles beside the little flame. Many staffed lighthouses relied on watch rotations, especially at stations with more than one keeper, so the light could be inspected throughout the night and never left entirely to chance. At isolated stations, there might be a principal keeper and assistants, each taking turns with lamp care, weather notes, and general vigilance. Sleep was organised around responsibility rather than comfort. The schedule did not care whether your dreams were getting to the good part. You step into the stairwell and begin the climb. The stairs are colder now. The tower seems to hold the night in layers. At the bottom, the air is damp and heavy. Higher up, it sharpens. Your lantern light slides across curved walls and worn steps. You move carefully, one hand on the rail, because pride is not worth tumbling down a spiral staircase in the dark. The storm outside is louder with each turn upward. It seems to wrap itself around the stone, then unwrap, then wrap again, like a giant wet scarf with emotional problems. Halfway up, you pause at a narrow opening. There is nothing to see but blackness, spray, and a few pale bursts where waves break far below. Still, the act of looking matters. A keeper watches not only the lamp but the world around it. Weather can change quickly, visibility can vanish, ice can form, a loose shutter can begin as a nuisance and become a hazard. The sea has many hobbies, and most of them involve making work for you. At the lantern room, the light greets you with its steady intensity. For a moment, your sleepy mind dislikes it. Too bright, too awake, too responsible. Then you step closer and inspect the flame. It burns cleanly. The wick holds its shape. If there is a lens, the glass catches and bends the light into shining segments, each surface needing to stay clear. You check for smoke, fogging and moisture, soot, and any irregular motion in the mechanism. Your hands move by memory, slow but exact. A quirky tidbit comes with the warm smell of oil. Some keepers grew so practiced at nighttime checks that they could perform much of the routine half awake, noticing tiny changes in flame height or sound while barely forming complete thoughts. It was not carelessness, it was the strange efficiency of repetition. Modern people may stumble to the kitchen at night and open the refrigerator without knowing why. You, slightly more useful, climb a tower and judge combustion. You wipe condensation from a metal edge. You adjust a draft. You make sure the fuel level remains safe. Or the lamp is not merely burning, it is communicating. Its rhythm, colour, height, and steadiness are all part of the message, somewhere beyond the storm. A mariner may be searching for this exact light, waiting for its flash or fixed glow to confirm position. That thought keeps your hands careful even while your eyelids feel lined with sand. Historians still argue whether watch rotations produced a special kind of alertness, halfway between sleep and labour, that shaped the keeper's entire sense of time. You can feel that argument in your bones. The night is no longer one long stretch. It is divided into checks, notes, climbs, descents, and brief returns to warmth. Midnight is not midnight. It is the hour of wick inspection. The next hour is not an hour. It is the distance between one careful look and another. You take out the log or return below to write, depending on the station's arrangement. Either way, the record matters. keepers were expected to note weather, lamp condition, fuel use, and unusual events. A logbook is not dramatic, which is exactly why it matters. It turns a storm from chaos into entries: wind strong and sea high, light burning well, rain heavy, glass wet with spray. The handwriting may be cramped and tired, but it holds the night down on paper. Downstairs again, you meet the small domestic world as if it belongs to someone else. The cup, the table, the bunk, the low stove, the chair waiting in the wrong place no matter where you put it. You add a little fuel to the stove if needed, though not so much that you must fuss over it. You take a sip of water that tastes faintly of the container, the room, and your own low standards. In a storm station, refreshment is not a spa experience. It is survival with a tin cup. If there is another keeper, perhaps you exchange a few words, nothing poetic. Maybe a report on the flame, maybe a grumble about the wind, maybe a sentence that contains more meaning than grammar. Men and women in such places learn to communicate efficiently during bad weather. Too much talk could wake others. Too little could miss danger. The ideal conversation is brief, useful, and only mildly resentful. Then comes the difficult part, returning to sleep. Your body is awake enough to be annoyed, but tired enough to be clumsy. You sit on the bunk, remove only what you must, and lie down with the lantern placed safely nearby. The room seems louder after the lantern room's brightness. Your eyes adjust. The storm settles into its patterns again, but now your mind has fresh material to worry over. Was that draft correct? Did the flame look a little high? Did you write the wind direction clearly? Is the mechanism turning as smoothly as it should? This is the keeper's private torment you check so you can rest, and checking gives you new things to think about while not resting. You breathe slowly. You remind yourself of what you saw: flame steady, glass sound, mechanism moving, fuel sufficient, door secure. The facts become a lullaby, plain and serviceable. No violins needed. The storm tries to interrupt with a long howl at the window, but you have heard that particular drama already. Very impressive. Weather. Do write it in the guest book. Sleep approaches again, thinner than before, but real. It does not fall over you like a curtain. It folds around the edges first. The stove's glow fades behind your eyelids. The surf becomes a low pulse. The next watch waits somewhere ahead, but not yet. For now, the light is awake, the log is marked, and the tower holds its place between sea and sky. You drift with one ear open, not fully free of duty, not fully captured by it, resting in the narrow space that lighthouse keepers learn to call enough. The air changes before the storm reaches its worst strength. You feel it not as a single sign, but as a collection of small warnings gathering around the tower. The stove draws differently. The door seems to press inward with a heavier patience. Your ears feel full, as if the whole sky has lowered itself and is now crouching on the roof. The waves no longer strike only with anger. They strike with rhythm, size, and a confidence that suggests they have invited several larger cousins. You sit at the table with the logbook open, the lantern beside your elbow, and a barometer fixed nearby like a gloomy little prophet. Its needle has been falling, not politely, not with the subtle manners of a calm afternoon. It has been dropping in a way that makes even tired eyes pay attention. The pressure is going down, and everyone in the lighthouse knows what that usually means. The weather is tightening its fist. A mainstream historical fact rests in the lamplight by the 19th century. Many lighthouse keepers regularly recorded barometer readings, wind direction, sea state, and visibility, because weather observation became part of the practical work of coastal safety. These notes helped keepers judge changing conditions and created useful records over time. The keeper is not only a lamp tender, you're also a watcher of air, water, cloud, and all the moody behaviour between them. You lean closer to the instrument, though leaning does not improve the news. The glass face reflects your tired expression. You tap nothing, because tapping a barometer does not make the weather better. it only gives you the brief satisfaction of bothering the messenger. The needle sits low, the storm outside answers with a broad gust that makes the shutters rattle. "Very well," says the sky, "since you asked. There are other signs. The smoke from the stove hesitates in the flue. A draught curls along the floor where it did not curl an hour ago. And the sea has changed colour, though in darkness colour is mostly imagination. Still, when foam bursts in the lantern glow outside, it looks thicker, dirtier, churned with sand and weed. The wind has shifted a point, perhaps more. You note it carefully, because the direction matters. A wind that drives waves straight onto the rocks below is different from one that scrapes along the side. Both are rude. One is simply more committed. You dip the pen and write, slowly enough that the letters remain readable. Wind increasing, pressure falling, sea very high, visibility poor. The words look small compared with the sound outside. That is one of the odd comforts of a logbook. It makes huge things fit into lines. The storm may roar like an empire collapsing, but on paper it becomes 4 tidy observations and a blot of ink near your thumb. A quirky tidbit slips into the room with the draft some old mariners and keepers trusted their bodies almost as much as instruments, claiming they could feel a coming gale in an aching joints, tight scars, headaches, or the strange behaviour of animals. Whether or not every ache was useful weather science. The habit of noticing mattered. A keeper who pays attention to tiny changes has a better chance of staying ahead of large ones. Also, if your knee predicts a storm, it is only fair to give it some credit, perhaps not a medal, but at least a warm place by the stove. The barometer is not the only warning system in your world. There may be storm signals shown at nearby harbours, flags or shapes hoisted by day, lamps by night, messages sent along coasts when communications allow. In some periods, telegraph lines helped spread weather warnings faster than rumour, although bad weather enjoyed destroying lines just to keep everyone humble. The keeper may receive warnings, or may be entirely dependent on what the sky, sea, and instruments reveal. In this tower, tonight, the signs are close enough to touch. You stand and move to the door, not to open it. That would be silly. And the storm is already making enough suggestions without being invited inside. You check the latch of the bar, the seams where water might force through. The wood is swollen. The iron is cold. The wind presses once, then releases, as if testing whether the tower has grown careless. It has not. Neither have you. Historians still argue whether traditional weather wisdom among keepers and sailors was mostly practical observation, inherited folklore, or a blend so complete that separating the two misses the point. You feel the blend tonight. The barometer gives its number, the waves give their thunder, the smoke, the draught, the ache in your fingers, the taste of salt in the air. All of it speaks together. Science and superstition sit at the same table, both looking out the dark window and deciding not to be smug. The tower seems smaller when the pressure falls. The ceiling feels lower, the walls feel nearer. You become aware of stored supplies, lamp fuel, dry matches, spare cloth, tools, and the exact location of everything that may be needed. In violent weather, preparation becomes a kind of sleep medicine. A mind that has checked the necessary things is more willing to rest, although it may still complain in the margins. You make a round through the lower spaces, fuel secure, water covered, food stored away from damp, spare lamp materials ready, oil containers steady, nothing loose near the door, nothing likely to topple if the tower jolts. You listen at each pause, not for drama, but for difference. The normal storm has a shape. A worsening storm changes that shape. You're not afraid of loudness alone. You're wary of new sounds. A sharp clatter comes from somewhere above. You stop. The tower hums, rain lashes, another clatter follows, lighter. You tilt your head, waiting. There it is again, irregular, metallic, not part of the usual rhythm. Your tiredness folds itself away like a blanket put aside. You take the lantern and climb. The sound grows clearer near the upper landing. Not glass breaking, not the lamp mechanism. A loose fitting perhaps, or a hook tapping in the draft near an outer frame. You enter carefully, keeping your body low and your hand firm on the rail. The lantern room glows, the main light steady inside it, but the wind has found some small piece of metal and is making it perform a solo nobody requested. You secure it with cold fingers, tightening, wedging, tying as needed. The task is minor, almost laughably small compared with the force outside. Yet this is the work that keeps the night from unravelling. A small loose object can crack glass, damage a frame, or become one more thing to worry about when sleep is already thin. You give it a final check. It holds. The storm, deprived of its toy, throws rain at the panes in protest. Back below, the logbook waits. You add the note, loose fitting secured, wind still rising. Your handwriting leans slightly, like a person trying to walk across a deck. The barometer remains low. The stove breathes uneasily. The bunk waits in the corner, not inviting exactly, but available, which in this weather is practically luxurious. You sit for a moment before lying down. The old warnings have done their work. They have not stopped the storm. They have prepared you to meet it in small actions, each one ordinary and necessary. That is how keepers earn sleep under a falling glass. Not by ignoring danger, and not by staring at it until dawn, but by reading the signs, making the rounds, writing the facts, and trusting that preparedness can hold the mind still for a while. You pull the blanket over your shoulders. Outside, the gale gathers itself again. Inside, the barometer keeps its silent counsel, the logbook holds the night in ink, and your eyes close around the knowledge that the worst may come, but it will not find you unwarned. The smell of oil reaches you before the next duty fully takes shape in your mind. It waits in the room like a quiet reminder, thick, practical, and faintly sharp. Even in sleep, your hands remember it. The keeper's work is not only watching the sea or listening to the tower, it is tending a flame so carefully that the flame becomes almost like another living thing in the station. Hungry, bright, delicate, and very fussy for someone with no bones. You rise again in the dark, guided by habit and the low glow of the lantern. The storm continues to work outside, but now your attention narrows to the old craft of keeping light alive. This is the part that looks simple from far away. A ship sees a steady beam and thinks, there is the lighthouse, safe enough, clear enough, useful enough. The ship does not see the hands that trim, wipe, pour, polish, adjust, and climb until the night becomes a ladder repeated over and over. The lamp waits above, and the lamp is never just a lamp. A mainstream historical fact settles in with the scent of fuel before electric lighting became common in lighthouses. Many stations used oil lamps, including systems that burned whale oil, colza oil, lard oil, and later kerosene, each requiring careful attention to wicks, fuel flow, ventilation, and cleanliness. The keeper's sleep depended on the technology of the light, because different lamps demanded different kinds of care. Some burned more steadily than others, some smoked. Some required frequent trimming. All of them expected respect, which is an impressive attitude for a device that can be ruined by a dirty wick. You climb with tools in hand, a cloth, a trimming knife or scissors, perhaps a small container, perhaps a spare wick, perhaps the things your station requires. The stairwell is cold, but your palms are already remembering heat. The lantern room shines ahead. As you step into it, the contrast is startling. Down below, the storm rules the sound. Up here, the flame rules the eye. The lamp burns inside its glass and metal housing, steady but not effortless. It draws air. It consumes fuel. It leaves traces. You study the wick. If it is too high, it may smoke. If it is too low, the light weakens. If the edge burns unevenly, the flame becomes ragged. A ragged flame may leave soot, and soot on the glass is like sleep dust on the eye of the lighthouse. Very poetic, yes, but mostly inconvenient and dangerous. You trim with care, not too much, not too little. Your fingers work close to warmth while the storm chills your back through the glass. The flame responds, settling into a cleaner shape. This little adjustment may decide whether a beam carries clearly through sleet. There is no applause, which is rude, but expected. Lighthouses are full of essential tasks that nobody cheers for unless something goes terribly wrong. That is the keeper's great bargain with history do the job perfectly, and almost no one notices. A quirky tidbit flickers beside the lamp. Some keepers became obsessive polishers of reflectors and lenses, competing in quiet pride over whose apparatus shone brightest and whose brass looked most immaculate. There are stories of inspections where keepers presented lantern rooms polished so fiercely that every surface reflected the visitor like a courtroom of tiny judges. It sounds excessive until you stand here with salt mist creeping everywhere and realize that cleanliness is not vanity, it is visibility. Also, when you live in a storm tower, polishing brass may be the closest thing you have to a hobby that does not involve talking to the furniture. You wipe soot from the chimney glass, the cloth darkens, you check the draft. The air must feed the flame without making it wild. Ventilation matters, especially when wind outstud creates strange pressures around the lantern. A lamp can be temperamental during storms. Drafts change, moisture gathers, a tiny fault grows if ignored. You lean close, listening to the flame's soft sound beneath the roar. It should not flutter too much. It should not hiss oddly. It should not pulse as if uncertain of itself. Historians still argue whether the real genius of lighthouse keeping lay in discipline, mechanical understanding, or the patient craft knowledge that never fit neatly into official manuals. Tonight, with oil on your fingers and stormlight flashing against the glass, the answer feels like craft, not grand theory, not heroic instinct. Craft, the knowledge of how wick should look at a glance, the memory of how much oil the lamp drinks in a hard night, the sense of when a chimney is beginning to cloud, the ability to act while sleepy without becoming careless. You refill what needs refilling, carefully. A spill is more than a mess. Oil on metal, wood, or cloth can create danger. Fuel is life for the light, but it is also a substance that demands order. Containers must be secured, caps tightened, cloth stored safely. The lantern room is bright, but the work is full of shadows if neglected. You move slowly because haste is just clumsiness wearing a hat. The storm slams rain against the glass so hard that the panes blur. The beam pushes through anyway. You glance outward and see almost nothing. Only flying spray and darkness, yet somewhere, perhaps miles off, that light may still be seen as a pale pulse through the weather. You do not need to know who sees it. The possibility is enough. It turns trimming a wick into an act of fellowship with strangers. Your hands are warm near the lamp, cold at the knuckles, slick with oil despite the cloth. You rub them together and smell fuel, metal, and salt in bed. That smell follows you. It seeps into cuffs and blankets. Many keepers carried it constantly, the scent of their work stitched into clothes and skin. Modern people might call it unpleasant. You think of it as proof. The light has been tended, the night has been touched and corrected. Another small adjustment. The flame steadies further. The light grows cleaner, less smoky, more confident. You check the lens surfaces, careful not to scratch them. If the apparatus rotates, you listen to its motion. If weights or clockwork drive it, they must be watched and wound according to need. The lamp's brilliance depends on a small society of parts behaving themselves, which is always a bold hope in bad weather. At last, the immediate work is done, not finished forever. Nothing in a lighthouse is finished forever, only done for now. That phrase becomes a pillow for the mind. done for now, clean for now, full for now, steady for now. You descend with the soiled cloth and tools, carrying the warmth of the lantern room in your hands. The lower quarters feel darker and colder by comparison. You store everything safely, making sure no oily rag lies where heat might find it. You take a moment to wash or wipe your fingers as well as conditions allow. The smell remains, it always remains. The storm has its salt, the stove has its smoke, and you have lamp oil. Everyone has contributed to the atmosphere. How generous! The bunk receives you again. Your body is tired in a different way now, not only from fear or cold, but from concentration. The mind that measures flame and wick has spent itself on fine detail. That can help sleep. Large worries are hard to hold when small tasks have been completed well. You repeat the facts in silence. Wick trimmed, glass wiped, fuel sufficient, draft good, flame clear. The words slow your breathing. The storm still rages, but the lamp above has been given what it needs. You pull the blanket close, and the faint smell of oil rises from your sleeve. It is not sweet, it is not soft, but it is familiar. And familiarity is one of the old keeper's true blankets. Your eyelids lower. The flame burns cleanly overhead, awake on your behalf, and sleep returns like a careful hand placed over a lantern, not to extinguish it, but to shield it from the wind. The glass begins speaking in a sharper voice. Not breaking, not yet, just speaking. Each pane in the lantern room catches the wind differently, and the storm runs its fingers over the metal frames with a restless, scraping insistence. Far above the sleeping quarters, the lantern room has become the most exposed place in your world. A bright crown wrapped in darkness, spray and pressure. You feel its danger even from below. The tower may be thick and grounded, but the room of glass at the top seems almost impossibly delicate, as if someone placed a crystal cup on the head of a giant and then asked the ocean to behave. The ocean, of course, declines. You wake to a rattling sound that is not part of the ordinary pattern. It is lighter than a door thud, quicker than a loose chain, sharper than rain. Your eyes open at once. The bunk, the blanket, the room, the low stove glow, all return in pieces. Then the sound comes again, a nervous chatter high above. Glass against frame, frame against storm. The body understands before the mind completes the sentence. You rise. The floor is icy beneath your boots. Your hands find the lantern. The small flame wakes in its cage, and you climb with your coat half fastened, because dignity is a summer luxury. The storm seems to grow louder with every turn of the stairs. It does not merely howl now. It strikes, pauses, then strikes again, as if choosing angles. The tower carries the impacts downward through stone and iron. A wave booms against the lower rock with such force that the stair beneath your foot seems to answer. A mainstream historical fact steadies your thoughts. Lighthouse lantern rooms were built with specially framed glass panes designed to protect the lamp and lens while allowing the beam to shine outward. But keepers still had to guard against cracked glass, leaks, ice, salt crust, and storm damage. The lantern glass was not decoration, it was the barrier between the light and the weather. If it failed, wind could disturb the flame, rain or snow could cloud the apparatus, and broken fragments could turn a working room into a glittering problem no one ordered. At the upper landing, the rattling becomes clear. You open the inner door carefully and step into brilliance. The lamp burns steadily, but the room around it is alive with motion. Water streaks the outside of the panes. Spray bursts across the glass in pale sheets. The wind presses so hard that one panel trembles in its frame, and the sound sets your teeth gently on its edge. Not a grand crash, not a disaster, a warning. You move close, but not too close. Glass under pressure deserves respect. You examine the frame by lantern and lamp glow, looking for a cracked pane, a loosened putty line, a shifted latch. Any sign that the storm has found a weakness, you keep your body angled away, because even sleepy keepers prefer not to receive a face full of broken weather window. That is not in the official list of relaxing night activities. The pane chatters again. You see the problem. A fitting has loosened just enough to let the frame vibrate. Nothing dramatic, which is exactly how many dangerous things begin. A tiny looseness becomes a larger looseness. A larger looseness becomes a crack. A crack becomes wind entering where wind should not be. And wind, once indoors, behaves like a guest who has no intention of leaving before breakfast. You steady the frame with one hand and reach for the tools kept nearby for this very reason. Your fingers are clumsy from cold, but the motion is familiar. Tighten, brace, wedge, check. The glass sings under the gusts. You wait between the strongest pushes, working in the brief, softer moments. Outside, the sea hurls spray so high that the lantern seems surrounded by flying white smoke. It is not hard to imagine a keeper feeling as if the entire tower has been lowered into the surf. A quirky tidbit flickers at the edge of the lampglow in some exposed rock lighthouses. Keepers reported sea spray striking so high that it coated upper windows with salt and even small stones, forcing them to clean the glass repeatedly during bad weather. There are accounts of waves throwing improbable debris onto galleries far above normal water level. The sea is apparently the sort of neighbour who throws things at your windows and then pretends it is just being atmospheric. You secure the fitting and listen. The rattle lessens, but does not vanish completely. The storm is too strong for silence. Silence would be suspicious anyway. The goal is not perfect quiet. The goal is safe noise. You learn to accept that distinction. A lighthouse in winter can sound alarming while remaining sound. A dangerous noise is different from an ugly one. Tonight, almost everything is ugly. Only a few things are dangerous. You circle the lantern room as far as it is safe, inspecting each pane. The beam moves through the glass, touching the wet surfaces, splitting into shimmers. Light makes the storm visible in fragments rain like needles, foam like torn cloth, black waves heaving beyond the rocks. The lantern room is both watchtower and trap. It gives you sight, but it exposes you to the knowledge of how much force is out there. Down in the bunk, the sea is a sound. Up here, it is a moving wall. Historians still argue whether keepers feared the loss of the lantern glass more for the practical danger to navigation or for the psychological blow of seeing the lighthouse itself wounded. You understand both possibilities. A cracked pane threatens the lamp, the lens, the entire purpose of the station, but it also feels personal. The tower can tolerate wind, it can tolerate rain, yet glass is the fragile eye through which the light looks outward. When it shakes, something in your chest shakes with it. A gust hits from a new angle. The room flashes white as spray covers the panes. For one startled second, the outside disappears completely, and the lantern room becomes a bright bubble inside rushing water. Then the spray drains away in uneven lines, and darkness returns. You exhale. The lamp remains steady. The flame does not care for theatrics, which is admirable. The flame simply burns, doing its little job with more poise than anyone wearing damp socks should be expected to show. You wipe an inner trace of moisture where cold and warmth have made the glass fog slightly. You check the lamp chimney, then the lens. You do not hurry away. The body wants the bunk, but the mind needs proof. Another gust, another tremble. The skewered frame holds better now. The chattering has become a dull vibration, folded into the larger voice of the storm. Acceptable, not pleasant. Acceptable. That word is powerful in a lighthouse. Acceptable means the light continues. Acceptable means the glass stays whole. Acceptable means you may return below. Not because the storm is kind, but because the situation has been made manageable. You collect the tool, tuck the cloth back where it belongs, and take one final look at the panes. They shine with water and lamp glow, each one a small, stubborn refusal. The descent feels longer than the climb. Your legs are heavy, Your shoulders carry tension you did not know you were holding. The stairwell darkens beneath you in slow turns, and the sounds of the lantern room rise behind you. Less sharp now, more distant. The lower quarters receive you with their humble collection of smells and shadows. Stove smoke, wool, oil, salt, tired human. You make a note in the logbook with fingers that still remember the trembling glass. Lantern frame tightened, heavy spray on panes, light steady. The words look plain, almost boring. Good. Boring is often what survival looks like once it has been written down. The storm may prefer drama, but the logbook prefers facts, and tonight the logbook is the calmer companion. Back in the bunk, you keep seeing the glass flash white with spray. Your eyelids close, and the image remains there for a while, bright and wavering, or you let it soften. The rattling above has changed. Your ear accepts it now and sorting it into the safe enough category. The tower still hums, the sea still throws itself upward, the lantern room still trembles, but the glass holds. You pull the blanket higher and imagine each pane as a cold, clear shield around the flame. Thin. Yes. Fragile. Perhaps. But breast cool. Watched. And still in plough. Sleep comes carefully, stepping around the memory of the rattling frame. It settles when your mind finally trusts the sound overhead, not as silence, but as endurance. Above you, the storm keeps striking the glass. Above that, the light keeps shining through. The kettle becomes important around the hour when the night feels as if it has no edges. You sit near the stove, listening to water begin its small domestic complaint inside blackened metal, while the storm outside continues its large, expensive tantrum against the world. Steam gathers at the spout. The room smells of smoke, damp socks, oil, and something almost comforting from the shelf. Perhaps tea, perhaps coffee, perhaps the noble dust of a biscuit that has accepted its fate. You are learning that sleep in a winter lighthouse is not only about the bunk, it is also about everything that happens around the bunk. Warm drink, dry cloth, a blanket shaken free of grit, boots placed near heat but not so near that they stiffen, crack, smoke, or begin a private career as chimney kindling. These little rituals do not defeat the storm. They make the storm smaller inside your mind, which is sometimes the best any person can do without being a mythological sea god. A mainstream historical fact settles beside the stove lighthouse keepers often had to manage their own food, fuel, clothing, and domestic repairs, especially at remote stations where supplies arrived only when weather allowed. Keeping warm, fed, and dry was not separate from keeping the light. It was part of the same survival system. A keeper who is chilled, hungry, and clumsy from fatigue is not safer for the lamp, the lens, or the ship searching the coast. You pour the hot drink carefully. The cup warms your hands before it reaches your mouth. Its taste is plain, perhaps a little smoky, perhaps slightly metallic from the water container, but tonight it feels luxurious. Not palace luxury, lighthouse luxury, the kind where the cup is not cracked, the drink is hot, and no one has to climb outside onto a gallery in sleet at this exact second. Truly, civilization has peaked. Your boots sit near the stove with their tongues open. The leather is dark with wet. Salt dries in pale marks along the seams. You stuff a twist of cloth or paper inside to draw out damp, knowing it will only help a little. Winter water is patient. It enters hems, cuffs, soles, blankets, gloves, and moods. You hang stockings where they may warm without scorching. You rub your toes through dry wool, encouraging them to remain loyal to the rest of your body. The room is cramped, yet it contains a whole world of maintenance. A nail worn in the chair must be noticed. A blanket must be folded away from floor damp. Food must be sealed against mice if the station has them. And many stations do, because mice have never respected human hardship. Bread must be guarded from mould, coal or wood must be measured, water must not be wasted. Every object has a job. Every job becomes heavier when the weather traps you. A quirky tidbit rustles in the cupboard. Some keepers kept surprisingly careful household routines, polishing, sweeping, airing bedding, and arranging stores with the pride of people who understood that disorder in a lighthouse could become dangerous. There are accounts of inspections where a keeper's domestic neatness mattered almost as much as the condition of the lamp. A messy shelf was not just untidy, it was a future midnight injury waiting to introduce itself to your shin. You smile a little at that as you move a tin from the table edge. The sea may be violent, but at least the tin will not leap off and contribute percussion to the evening. Small victories deserve recognition. Perhaps not a parade. The room is too narrow for a parade anyway. The stove gives a low sigh. You feed it just enough to keep warmth alive, watching the draft carefully. Too little heat and the room becomes a stone refrigerator with bedding. Too much attention to the stove and you lose more sleep. Too much fuel used carelessly and later nights become harder. Keeper thinks beyond the hour. Stores must last. Fire must be safe. Heat must be coaxed rather than demanded. The flame in the stove is humbler than the lamp above, but it keeps your fingers useful and your thoughts from freezing into one long complaint. Historians still argue whether the domestic labour of lighthouse life has been underestimated because official records focus so heavily on lamps, machinery, and maritime safety. Sitting here with a damp boot in one hand and a cup in the other, you suspect the answer is yes. The light could not shine without the bodies that tended it, and those bodies needed dry stockings, warm food, repaired coats, swept floors, and places to sleep without mildew staging a quiet revolution. You take inventory in your mind: oats, salt meat perhaps, bread if it has survived, tea or coffee, dried peas, flour, maybe potatoes in a sack, if fortune has been less sarcastic than usual. At some stations, supply boats might be delayed for days or weeks in rough weather, leaving keepers to stretch stores with careful imagination. Meals became repetitive, practical, and filling. You eat not for pleasure alone, but to have enough strength to climb, tend, haul, wipe, and endure. A small meal waits in a pot, thickened by time and reheating. You spoon it into a bowl and the steam fogs your face. It is not beautiful food. It would not impress a restaurant critic unless the critic had recently been lashed to a rock in a gale, in which case he might become very generous. Warm food has a way of lowering fear by degrees. The storm remains outside, the bowl is inside. You hold that simple boundary like a charm. Your coat hangs nearby, still damp at the hem. You check the pockets by habit. Matches dry, cloth folded, knife or small tool present, nothing missing. The keeper's clothing is a portable workshop, blanket, rain shield, an emotional support system with buttons. You repair a small tear with awkward stitches, because torn fabric catches, widens, and lets in cold. Needlework in a storm tower is not delicate leisure, it is defence. Rain lashes the window. A bead of water slips down the inside wall where condensation gathers. Not a leak, just damp air becoming visible. You wipe it. Salt and moisture are relentless. They turn domestic life into a slow battle against softness, rust, rot, and smell. Bedding must be lifted and aired when weather permits. Blankets must be kept away from wet boots. Even the mattress must be protected from the creep of damp. Sleep is easier when the bed feels like a bed rather than a sponge with historical significance. The hot drink loosens the tightness in your shoulders. You feel the weariness return, but it is warmer now, less sharp. This is how the small rituals work. They create a bridge between duty and sleep. You cannot simply fall from a lantern check into rest. Your mind is still bright, still scanning, but pour water, dry hands, stir food, shift boots, fold cloth, bank stove, and the body slowly receives the message that for the moment, no emergency is standing in the room wearing your hat. You clean the cup because future you deserves one small kindness. Future you will still be tired, cold, and possibly annoyed by everything with hinges. But at least future you will not meet a crusted cup in the dark. You place it where it belongs. You push the chair close enough to the table that it will not ambush your knee. The room becomes orderly again, not pretty, but ready. The storm has not faded. It pounds, whistles, and rattles, yet inside the kettle has gone quiet. The bowl is empty. The boots are warming, and your blanket waits with the little stored heat near the edge. You sit on the bunk and remove only what can be spared. The dry stockings feel like treasure. The blanket closes around your shoulders with scratchy, faithful weight. You breathe in smoke, wool, oil, salt, and the faint leftover warmth of tea, not perfect, not soft, but human, very human. A tower can hold a light, but these small comforts hold the keeper. They gather around your tired body and whisper that endurance is made of ordinary things repeated with care. You lie down while the stove glows low. Your boots continue their slow argument with dampness. The sea continues its much louder argument with land. Between them, you drift towards another broken piece of sleep, warmed by a cup, a blanket, and the humble miracle of dry feet. The door is only a few steps away, but tonight it might as well be the border of another planet. You look at it from the table, where the lantern casts a soft circle over wood grain, crumbs, and the dark edge of the logbook. The latch is firm. The bar is set. Wind presses against the outer frame in long shoves, then pauses, then returns with the stubbornness of a debt collector who has taken sailing lessons. You do not open it. That is not fear. Or not only fear, it is judgment. During a violent winter storm, the outside is not merely uncomfortable, it is a place where footing disappears, spray blinds, loose objects fly, and one careless step on rock or gallery can turn duty into disaster. The lighthouse is built to stand in weather that a human body cannot politely negotiate. A tower may endure the gale. You, being made of softer materials and questionable confidence, are better advised to remain inside unless the work truly demands otherwise. A mainstream historical fact settles into the small room many lighthouse stations, especially those on offshore rocks or isolated islands, could be cut off for days or even weeks when rough seas made landings impossible. Supply boats could not always approach, relief keepers could be delayed, mail, fretty food, medicine, and visitors waited on the weather. The storm did not simply make sleep difficult, it removed the comforting idea that help could arrive quickly. You sit with that knowledge, and the room seems both safer and smaller. The walls hold, the roof holds, the lamp burns above. Yet beyond the door there is no easy rescue, no neighbour crossing the road with a spare blanket, no doctor arriving in a carriage because someone has a fever or a broken wrist. Even shouting would be foolish. The wind would tear the words apart and throw them into the surf, where they would join all the other useless things the sea has collected. You are not alone because there are no people on Earth. You are alone because Earth has become temporarily unreachable. That changes sleep. You can be warm enough, fed enough and tired enough, and still some part of your mind stays awake beside the barred door. It thinks of the boat that cannot come. It thinks of the path vanished under spray. It thinks of the horizon, though there is no horizon tonight, only darkness where distance used to be. The storm folds the world close around the lighthouse. Inside the walls, every object becomes important. Outside the walls, everything becomes unknown. A gust hits hard enough to make the door groan. You glance at the latch. It holds. The sound fades. Your pulse takes longer to settle than the wood does. A quirky tidbit comes tapping with the rain in some remote stations. Keepers developed elaborate ways to pass time during isolation, from carving models and keeping pets to writing long journals, studying languages, or becoming deeply invested in the behaviour of one very suspicious chicken. Not every station had a chicken, of course, but isolation gives even ordinary animals the statuses of co-workers. A cat chasing mice becomes security staff, a goat becomes dairy department, a gull outside becomes an unwanted critic with wings. You understand the impulse. The human mind looks for company, even in chores. You speak to the stove when it draws well. You mutter at the wind when it changes direction. You thank the cup for not breaking, which is perhaps a sign that the night has become long. But also manners cost nothing. Isolation does not always feel dramatic. Sometimes it feels like hearing your own voice and realizing it has become part of the furniture. You move through the lower room and check the supplies again, not because you expect them to vanish, but because counting is calming. Flour, oats, tea, fuel, clean cloth, spare matches sealed away from damp, lamp materials, tools, water. Each item is a promise that the tower can last a little longer on its own. Sleep becomes easier when the shelves make sense. Anxiety dislikes inventories. It prefers vague shadows and worst possible outcomes. You annoy it with lists. Historians still argue whether isolation weighed more heavily on keepers during storms because of physical danger, emotional loneliness, or the awareness that their duty could not be handed off. You feel all three braided together. If you become ill, the lamp still needs tending. If fear rises, the stairs still wait. If the storm worsens, no one outside the tower can take the next watch for you. Responsibility sits in the room like another person. Quiet, heavy, and not particularly helpful with the dishes. You lift the lantern and approach the door, not to open it, just to inspect. Water has forced itself beneath the outer threshold in a thin line. You wipe it away and press a rolled cloth near the gap. The wind makes a low sound through some tiny seam, as if the night is trying to whistle indoors. You run your fingers over the frame. Cold, damp, firm. A door in a lighthouse is not symbolic when the weather is violent. It is a shield, and it must be treated with the respect normally reserved for saints, surgeons, and people who bring dry socks. The thought of the world beyond returns in pieces. Perhaps there is a village far away with lamps in windows. Perhaps a harbour master is listening to the gale and wondering how the outer station fares. Perhaps a family member somewhere inland is sleeping through the same weather softened by distance. Their storm is rain on a roof. Yours is the sea trying to climb a tower. Same weather system, very different customer experience. You sit again and write in the logbook, seas preventing any landing, door secure, wind severe. The words are plain, but they mark your separation from the rest of the coast. The act of writing becomes a conversation with a future reader. Someone will see this entry when the weather clears. Someone will know the light was kept through these hours. The logbook becomes a thin thread across isolation, tying this small room to a morning not yet visible. The storm hammers the tower with renewed force. You pause, listening for anything that requires action. No new rattle, no crack, no call from above. The lamp continues. The door holds. Your breath comes slower. Now the isolation begins to change shape. It is still real, still pressing at the edges, but it is no longer only loneliness. It becomes enclosure, a hard, narrow safety. The world outside is unreachable. Yes, but it is also kept outside. The tower is not comfortable, but it is definite. You know its stairs, its corners, its smells, its noises, its stubborn strengths. The sea may surround you, but it does not get the chair by the stove or that chair is taken. You prepare for another fragment of sleep with the care of someone banking a fire, lantern placed safely, boots ready, coat near hand, door checked, supplies known, log marked, nothing grand, nothing theatrical, just the small protections that let a person close both eyes in a place where help cannot come. The bunk receives your tired body, the blanket settles, the wind presses the door again, but now the sound belongs to the outer world. You're inside the inner one, the one made of stone, flame, warm cloth, and practiced routine. You listen once more to the storm beyond reach, then to the steadier sounds within reach. The tower holds you apart from the world, and for a little while, that apartness becomes shelter. A second blanket changes the room. Not because it makes the lighthouse suddenly gentle, or because the storm decides to lower its voice and respect the household, which would be thoughtful but wildly out of character. The blanket changes things because it belongs to someone else. It lies folded at the foot of another narrow bed, or tucked around a child, or drawn across the shoulders of a wife sitting awake beside the stove. The lighthouse is no longer only a workplace with a bunk. It is a home, or at least a determined attempt at one, balanced inside weather that would prefer not to host guests. You move quietly because even storms do not excuse waking a child if you can avoid it. The floorboards creak in small betrayals beneath your boots. A cup sits on the table beside a bit of mending, a shawl hangs from a peg, there may be a cradle in the corner, or a small cot wedged where the room allows. Space is negotiated constantly. Every chair must earn its place, every pot, blanket, tool, and toy must be kept from becoming a midnight hazard. In a lighthouse, clutter is not charming, it is an ambush with sentimental value. A mainstream historical fact rests softly in the room many lighthouse keepers lived with their families, especially at shore stations and some island stations. And wives, children, and relatives often helped with daily work even when official records named only the keeper. Family life could bring warmth, help, and companionship, but it also brought worry when storms made the tower shake and the sea blocked escape. Sleep was no longer only your own problem, it became a household arrangement. The storm presses at the window and a child stirs. You pause. The little figure beneath the blanket turns and settles again, trusting the adults, the walls, and perhaps the lamp itself with the easy faith of someone who has not yet read enough weather reports to become properly nervous. That trust is both comforting and heavy. It can steady your hands. It can also make every rattle sound sharper. When you are alone, you fear for the light and your own bones. When family sleeps nearby, your fear grows more rooms. A wife or older child may already know the rhythms of the station. They know when to stay silent, when to bring cloths, when to warm food, when not to ask whether you are worried because the answer is standing in the room wearing wet boots. Many keeper families became skilled partners in the work. They watched weather, cleaned, carried, cooked, polished, signalled, and sometimes tended the light during illness or emergency. Official titles often lagged behind reality, as official titles enjoy doing while real people carry buckets. A quirky tidbit glimmers near the stove in several lighthouse communities. Keepers' wives became so capable that local mariners trusted their judgment as much as any appointed man's, and some women effectively kept lights for years before receiving formal recognition. There were women who trimmed lamps, kept logs, rescued sailors, rowed boats, and raised children in the same salty breath. History, being occasionally slow on paperwork, did not always catch up quickly. The sea, at least, did not care who held the title, only whether the light burned. You look toward the sleeping child again. The storm gives a long howl, and this time small eyes open. Is it bad, the child asks, or perhaps only whispers? You answer gently, not falsely. A lighthouse household cannot survive on lies, but it also does not need dramatic announcements at 2 a.m. You say the wind is strong, you say the light is steady, you say the tower is doing its work. These are useful truths. They fit in a child's mind without frightening it too badly. Also, they are better than saying the ocean is currently trying to slap the windows off the lantern room, which, while vivid, lacks parenting wisdom. The child listens, decides your face is calm enough, and sinks back into the blanket. You remain still until breathing lengthens again. That is one kind of watch-keeping too. Historians still argue whether children raised at lighthouse stations remembered storms chiefly as fear, adventure, routine, or a strange mixture that became nostalgia only later. You can imagine the mixture. A winter gale is terrifying in 1 hour and boring in the next. It interrupts sleep, rattles dishes, cancels supplies, and turns the stairwell into a cold tunnel. Yet it also gathers the household close. People speak softly and lamps glow. Blankets are shared. The tower becomes a small wooden and stone universe, and outside that universe, the dark sea performs its endless nonsense. You prepare a warm drink for the waking adult in the room, if there is one. Perhaps she has been mending by the low light, because clothing will not repair itself and storms rudely ignore laundry schedules. Her hands may be rough from salt, soap, rope, and stovework. Her face may show the same tired alertness you feel. There is comfort in meeting another pair of eyes that understands the sound overhead without needing explanation. Few words are needed. The frame near the upper glass is holding. The barometer remains low. The wind has shifted slightly. The child woke once. The stove needs only a little fuel. These small reports create household calm. They're a family version of the logbook, spoken softly between gusts. In a family station, sleep is shared but uneven. One person rises while another rests. One wakes at a rattle and waits to see whether the keeper moves. One pretends not to worry so the children will not. A baby may cry because babies are famously indifferent to maritime safety. A child may ask whether ships can see the light. An older son or daughter may help carry coal or fetch cloth, proud and sleepy at once. The lighthouse becomes a school of practical courage, although no one calls it that while searching for a dry stocking. You move around the room with care. The presence of others changes every action. You set the lantern where it gives light but not glare. You close a cupboard gently. You lift a kettle before it clanks. Even the storm seems louder when you're trying not to wake someone. The sea has no manners, but you do, and frankly, one of you should. The bedding must be managed carefully in damp weather. Children need warmth. Adults need enough rest to work. Spare blankets may be shifted from bed to chair to floor and back again. At times, families in cold stations slept close for warmth, not from sentiment alone, but because bodies are small stoves with opinions. The room may feel crowded, yet the crowding helps. The tower's loneliness thins when another person sighs in sleep nearby. You sit at the edge of your own narrow bed, listening to the household settle. The storm still surrounds everything. The lamp still calls you upward, yet the room holds a different kind of strength now, softer but not weaker. A cup near a hand, a shawl around shoulders, a child's steady breathing, a woman's quiet nod across the stove. These are not interruptions to lighthouse work. They are part of the life that made the work bearable. You lie down without fully undressing, careful not to disturb the blanket tucked beside you. The wind rises again, but your mind catches first on the breathing in the room, then on the glow at the stove, then on the thought that the light above is not guarded by one person alone. It is held by a household, by routines shared and remembered, by people who know where the matches are and when to speak softly. Sleep comes with more warmth and more worry, braided together. The tower keeps standing, the family keeps breathing, the storm keeps shouting outside like a rude visitor denied entry. Inside, someone dreams. The sound you fear most is not the loudest one. The loudest sounds belong to the storm itself, and by now the storm has made its personality very clear. It booms, whistles, rattles, slaps, and roars with the confidence of something that has never once been asked to use an indoor voice. You can recognize those noises, sort them, and sometimes even ignore them, but the sound you fear most is different. It is thin, uncertain, and human, a shout carried badly by wind, A bell from offshore, a gun or rocket signal, a desperate noise that does not belong to the tower. You lie in the bunk with your eyes closed, and your listening stretches outward past the walls. The lighthouse exists because the coast is dangerous. That is simple enough to say in daylight. When maps lie flat on tables and the sea looks decorative from a polite distance, at night, during a winter gale, that sentence grows teeth somewhere beyond the beam. Ships may be fighting for position. Some may be under sail, some under steam, some carrying cargo. Passengers, fishermen, families, or men so tired they no longer remember what dry feels like. They are looking for the light, fearing the rocks, counting seconds between flashes, measuring depth, hoping their reckoning is not a tragic little math problem. A mainstream historical fact is sits heavily in the darkness. Lighthouses were built to warn mariners of hazards such as reefs, shoals, headlands, harbour entrances, and dangerous coastlines, and their lights were often given distinctive patterns so sailors could identify where they were. A lighthouse was not a general decoration for the seaside, it was a coded warning, a bright sentence repeated into weather danger here. Steer wisely, stay alive if you can, you turn onto your side, the blanket rustles. The sound is absurdly small compared with the surf. Still, your mind keeps reaching beyond it. Was that a cry? No. Wind through a vent. Was that a bell? No. A loose kettle lid trembling. Was that a cannon, Nuffy? A wave striking an outer rock with the flat concussion of heavy water? The storm is a talented mimic, which is inconsiderate. It can make almost any sound resemble distress if your conscience is awake enough. And your conscience is always awake enough. A quirky tidbit drifts in like cold air beneath a door. Some keepers reported hearing phantom distress calls during wild nights, especially after local wrecks or near misses. Whether these were tricks of wind, memory, fatigue, or grief, they became part of lighthouse folklore. A tower that hears danger night after night becomes a fine place for ghost stories, because apparently sleep deprivation and howling weather were not atmospheric enough without adding invisible sailors to the guest list. You do not laugh loudly at that. The room is too dark, and the thought too close to something real. There were wrecks. Not every light prevented every disaster. Fog could hide a beam, snow could thicken the air, a lamp could be misread, a ship could lose steering, drag anchors, strike hidden stone, or be driven ashore by wind stronger than judgment. Keepers sometimes had to watch helplessly, seeing distress but unable to launch aid in seas that would swallow a boat. Sometimes they joined rescues when conditions allowed. Sometimes they could only keep the light burning and record what happened. That helplessness follows a keeper into bed. You imagine the beam passing over the water in measured sweeps, touching wave tops, vanishing in hain, returning again. The light is strong, but it is not a hand. It cannot pull anyone from a deck. It cannot calm a captain. It cannot make a sailor see sense if panic has taken the wheel. It can only warn, guide, and remain. There is comfort in that, but not enough to make the mind entirely quiet. Historians still argue whether the emotional burden of lighthouse work came more from constant vigilance or from the knowledge that even perfect vigilance could not save everyone. You feel the cruelty of that debate as the storm rolls around the walls. A keeper can do everything correctly. The wick can be trimmed, the glass cleaned, the fuel filled, the watch kept, and still the sea may take what it wants. Duty offers purpose, not control. That is a rather rude clause in the contract. And naturally it was printed in invisible ink. You sit up because lying down has become crowded with images. The lantern glows low near the table. You reach for the logbook and read the last lines. Wind severe, visibility poor, light steady. Those words help. They are a shield against imagination. Light steady. That is what can be done. That is what has been done. Another sound rises outside, long and strange. You freeze. It threads through the wind, higher than the surf, then disappears. Your hand remains on the page. The sound does not repeat. You wait for a count of 10, then 20, then 30. Nothing but the storm's usual violence. Perhaps wind through metal, perhaps a bird, perhaps some rope or fitting outside. Your body is not convinced, but your judgment asks for more evidence before it drags you up the stairs in a panic. This is a keeper's discipline to care without frenzy, concern without chasing every ghost around the room. You stand at last, not rushing, and climb part way to listen from a higher opening. The tower narrows the storm into different voices. At one level the wind moans, at another it whistles, near a vent it shrieks. You understand how easily the mind could make distress from these sounds. The coast at night is a storyteller and not a responsible one. At the lantern room, the light is steady. You look outward as well as darkness allows. There is no visible ship close under the rocks, no flare, no signal, no repeated cry, only the black sea, foam torn open by the beam, spray thrown sideways through the light. You watch for several sweeps, longer than required. The eye searches for shapes. A mast, a hull, a sudden lamp. Nothing forms. The storm remains vast and empty. The relief is real, though not cheerful. It is the relief of finding no disaster, while knowing disaster remains possible beyond sight. You check the lamp, because you are here, and because the hand needs something useful to do. Then you descend with the echo of imagined voices still lingering behind your ears. Back in the quarters, the bunk looks almost innocent. You write a small note in the log if needed unusual wind sound. No signal observed. Perhaps you do not write it at all, deciding it was only weather. Either choice says something about the night. Official history often records the clean facts. Private memory keeps the sounds that almost were. You return to bed and pull the blanket close. The mind continues to drift toward the dark water. But you guide it gently back to what is near. The stove, the table, the lamp tools, the stairs, the light above, steady and attended. You cannot hold every ship in your hands. You can hold this duty. You can keep this beam clear. The storm throws another heavy wave against the rocks. This time you hear only water. That is something. Your breathing slows. The imagined cries loosen their grip. Sleep comes carefully. Passing through a room crowded with old wrecks, half-heard signals and the quiet courage of doing the work anyway. Above you, the light repeats itself across the sea, not as a promise that all will be well, but as the best warning humans know how to give in the dark. The tower does not rely on flame alone. It has helpers, though calling them helpers may be generous on a night when every piece of machinery seems determined to develop a cough, a scrape, or a mysterious clank just as your eyelids begin to lower. Still, the lighthouse is full of devices meant to reduce the keeper's burden. Clockwork turns the lens, weights descend through the rigger, gears bite and release, fog bells strike, horns groan, chains move, regulators tick. Each invention promises order, and each one brings its own little collection of noises, duties, and opinions. You sit near the machinery spale, listening to a steady mechanical rhythm overhead. It is not the sea, not the wind, not the stove. It is a human-made heartbeat, measured and repeating, almost soothing once your mind accepts it. Almost. The problem with machinery is that when it works, it becomes a lullaby, and when it changes slightly, it becomes an alarm with excellent timing and no mercy. A mainstream historical fact turns quietly in the lamplight. Many 19th century and early 20th century lighthouses use clockwork mechanisms powered by descending weights to rotate lenses, and keepers had to wind those mechanisms regularly so the light kept its proper flash pattern. The great Fresnel lenses, with their rings to glass prisms, could be made to revolve, creating distinctive flashes that identified one lighthouse from another. The lens might look magical, but its movement depended on gears, weight, care, and someone awake enough to wind it. You rise to check the weight. It hangs in its shaft or housing, lower than it was. Having given its stored energy to the turning apparatus, gravity, at least, is punctual. You prepare to wind. The handle is cold, and the first pull reminds your arms that sleep has been interrupted enough times to qualify as a hobby. The mechanism resists, then yields in increments. You crank slowly, steadily, listening for unevenness. The weight rises, the gears answer, your shoulders burn a little. The storm outside can do all the roaring it likes. Inside, you're having a quiet contest with a machine that has no sympathy but excellent leverage. A quirky tidbit clicks into place with the gears in some towers. The descending weights travel down long shafts through the lighthouse, and a careless person could be startled by the slow movement of heavy chains or cables in the wall, like some patient iron creature making its way toward the floor. There were keepers who knew the exact sound of a healthy mechanism so well that a missed beat could wake them. Imagine being so trained that a gear clears its throat upstairs and your whole body says, "Absolutely no, we are getting up." You finish winding and pause. The lens continues its movement. The beam turns through the storm with measured dignity, as if it has never met panic and would prefer not to be introduced. That flash pattern matters. A fixed light, a single flash, grouped flashes, different intervals, all help mariners identify their place along the coast. In violent weather, certainty becomes precious. A sailor seeing the correct rhythm knows not simply that land is near, but which land, which danger, which decision may come next. The machinery helps create that certainty, but it also demands trust. You oil what needs oiling, sparingly. Too little lubrication and metal complains. Too much and grime gathers. You inspect teeth, pivots, brackets, and stops, as far as the station allows. A machine in a storm does not need your admiration. It needs maintenance. Admiration can wait until daylight, when everyone is less cold and the gears look less like they might be plotting. Then there is fog. The storm tonight is wind and rain, but winter often brings fog as well, and fog is the old enemy of light. A beam can be bright and still vanish in thick air. For that, many stations use sound signals, bells, whistles, sirens, horns, explosive signals in some places, and later compressed air or steam-powered foghorns. The keeper's sleep changed completely when fog rolled in, because the sound signal had to be kept running, monitored, wound, fueled, or timed. You imagine the fog bell in its housing, the striker pulled by clockwork, the bell ringing into wet darkness at set intervals. It is useful, yes. It is also the sort of neighbour that would make peaceful sleep pack a bag and leave. A bell sounding every few seconds or minutes does not fade easily into the background. It climbs into dreams wearing boots. A foghorn is worse, a deep mournful blast that can shake walls, dishes, and the thin patience of every person in the station. Historians still argue whether fog signals were more comforting or more tormenting for keepers who had to live beside them for hours or days. You can see both sides. The signal means the station is doing its duty when sight fails. It also means your bed is now located inside a giant musical instrument designed to warn ships by upsetting the air. Very noble, very loud, very difficult to nap through without becoming a philosopher by accident. The storm rattles the lantern glass again, but the machinery keeps its pace. You listen to the tick, the faint grind, the whispering rotation. These sounds begin to form a second kind of weather inside the tower. Outside, nature is wild and irregular. Inside, mechanisms divide time into units. Click, turn, drop, strike, wind again. The keeper sleeps between these units, not between sunset and sunrise. The night becomes mechanical as well as dark. You return to the quarters, but your ear remains with the gears. A tiny unevenness can pull you back from the edge of sleep. A missed click, a slowing turn, a weight reaching the bottom too soon. Machines reduce labour only by replacing one kind of labour with another. Instead of turning the lens by hand all night, you wind the clockwork. Instead of standing constantly beside the apparatus, you learn the sounds that mean it is safe to lie down. Progress, like a damp boot, is useful but never completely comfortable. On the table sits a small toolkit, arranged with care: screwdriver, oil can, spare fasteners, cloth, perhaps a wrench. Their presence reassures you. Not because you want to repair machinery at 3 a.m. during a gale. Nobody wants that, except perhaps a deeply unusual clockmaker with waterproof enthusiasm. But tools within reach make the tower feel answerable. Problems may come, but not every problem is mysterious. Some have screws, some have bearings. Some simply need the stubborn attention of a tired person who would rather be horizontal. You lie down again and listen. The storm beats its rough rhythm around the walls. The clockwork answers with its smaller rhythm. The two do not match. Yet together they become the night's strange lullaby. Wind surges, gear turns, sea booms, weight descends, rain scatters, lens moves. The light's pattern continues across the black water, regular in a world that is not. Your mind begins to settle around that regularity. The machine is not friendly exactly, but it is faithful when tended. It does what it was built to do, so long as human hands return to it before neglect gathers. That is the bargain between keeper and mechanism. You wind, clean, oil, and listen. It turns, flashes, rings, and warns. The blanket warms your shoulders. Your hands still feel the crank's cold handle. Somewhere above, the gears keep measuring the dark into manageable pieces. Sleep comes not in silence, but in time with the turning light, while the strange helpers of the tower whisper, tick, and labour through the storm. The old stories come closest when the lamp is steady. The machinery is wound, and there is nothing left to do but listen. Work gives the hands a place to put. Stillness gives fear a chair by the stove, and, unfortunately, it sits down. The storm presses around the lighthouse with tireless force, and in the spaces between its louder blows, your mind begins to fill the tower with things no logbook can properly hold. A scrape above becomes a footstep. A draught near the door becomes a whisper. A gull's cry, twisted by wind, becomes someone calling from the dark. You know better, mostly. You have checked the rooms, you know the tower's sounds, yet knowing better is not the same as feeling better, especially when you're tired enough to consider apologising to a chair after bumping into it. This is where fear, faith, and superstition settle into lighthouse life. Not as constant terror, but as little habits, private thoughts, repeated words, and stories told softly because the sea already has enough volume. A mainstream historical fact rests quietly in the room many lighthouse keepers lived and worked, in places deeply connected with maritime religion and sailor superstition, where prayers, omens, charms, and ghost stories often existed alongside practical navigation and strict maintenance routines. The coast has always been a borderland, half worksite, half mystery. People who spend their lives near danger tend to develop more than one way of speaking to it. You sit with your cup between your hands, feeling the last warmth fade into your fingers. Perhaps you say a prayer, perhaps you do not call it that. Perhaps it is only a sentence aimed into the night. Let the light hold, let the glass hold, let no ship come too close. The words are simple because fear has no patience for fancy grammar. The storm answers with rain against the wall, which is not exactly comforting, but at least it is honest. Some keepers carried religious books, some read psalms, some marked Sundays carefully even when storms blurred all other time. Trusted Providence and also checked the wick, because faith is admirable, but a smoky lamp still needs attention. There is no contradiction in that. You can believe in divine mercy and still tighten a loose latch. In fact, the latch may appreciate being included in the plan. The tower gives a sudden knock. You stop breathing for half a second. Then it comes again, dull and irregular. Not a spirit, not a drowned sailor, a piece of debris perhaps, or a shutter, taking wind, or something shifted near an outer frame. You know this. You repeat it in your mind. Still, the skin along your arms tightens. Darkness is a talented editor. It removes boring explanations and leaves only the dramatic ones. A quirky tidbit creeps in with the cold. Some lighthouse stations gained reputations for being haunted, often after wrecks, lonely deaths, or strange sounds that repeated in bad weather. Keepers and visitors told tales of footsteps on empty stairs, lights where no person stood, and voices carried through fog. Many such stories probably came from wind, birds, building movement, and exhausted imagination. But try explaining that politely to your nerves at 3 a.m. while the stairwell sounds as if someone is slowly climbing it. Your nerves may request a second opinion. You rise and carry the lantern to the lower stair. The light swings gently in your hand. The steps curve upward into shadow. No figure appears. No whisper speaks your name. There is only stone, rail, damp air, and the faint ticking of the mechanism above. You climb a short distance anyway, because superstition loses some of its power when asked to fill out a maintenance report. The knock comes again. From below, perhaps. You descend and find the cause near a storage space, a loose tool handle shifting with vibration, tapping wood in the gusts. You secure it, perhaps a little more firmly than necessary, because no one enjoys being emotionally manipulated by a broom or mallet. There, ghost removed. Very brave. History should be informed. Historians still argue whether lighthouse ghost stories reveal genuine belief, coping mechanisms for isolation, or later romantic inventions added by visitors who preferred their lighthouses gloomy and marketable. Inside the storm, the debate feels less tidy. A story can be untrue and still useful. It gives shape to fear. It lets people talk about loneliness without saying, "I am lonely." It makes the strange noises of a tower into characters, which may be easier than admitting the building itself is simply loud, damp, and old. You return to the table and notice the small habits that have accumulated around you. The lantern is always placed a certain way. A charm or keepsake may sit near a shelf, a Bible, a worn photograph, a shell, a coin, a ribbon, a pipe, or a folded letter may carry more meaning than its size suggests. Sailors have long kept tokens for luck. Keepers, though land-fixed, were close enough to sea danger to understand the impulse. A thing you can touch is useful when everything outside is moving. The storm strikes the tower again. You do not flinch as hard this time. The loose tool is silent. That helps. Explanations help. So do small rituals. You bank the stove in the same careful order. You check the matches. You touch the door latch. You glance upward toward the lamp. These repeated motions are not exactly superstition, not exactly science, not exactly prayer. They are the grammar of endurance. Do this, then this, then this. The mind follows the sequence and forgets to spiral into every possible disaster at once. You think of keepers who mark the weather with sayings, red sky warnings, halos around the moon, birds flying low, cats restless, ashes behaving oddly in the stove. Some signs were based on observation, others on tradition, and some were probably invented by people who enjoyed sounding wise near harbours. But even questionable signs encouraged attention. If you are watching the sky, the birds, the smoke, and the pressure, you are awake to change. Superstition can be poor science, but it sometimes keeps the eyes open. A low moan moves through the tower, rising and falling like a voice. You know it is wind through a vent. You say it aloud. Wind through a vent. The words settle the room. Naming a sound gives it edges. Fear dislikes edges. It prefers fog. You stretch out on the bunk again, but this time you leave the small keepsake, prayer book, or familiar object within sight. You do not need it to protect the tower. Stone, metal, glass, oil, and labour must do that, but it protects some softer place in you. the place that knows storms are larger than human plans and sleep is easier when the night feels witnessed. The tower creaks, the sea booms, the light continues. You let the old stories fade into the walls where they belong. Neither believed nor dismissed completely. They become part of the weather of the mind, passing through, losing full force. Your eyes close. A final gust slides around the lantern room like a long breath. You answer with your own slower breath, half prayer, half habit, and drift towards sleep while the lighthouse keeps its flame between fear and the dark. The newer light has a different kind of patience. It does not smell so strongly of oil. It does not ask for a wick to be trimmed with sleepy fingers. It does not smoke the glass in the same old way, or demand that you climb quite so often with cloth, knife, and fuel. The flame has become brighter, cleaner, more obedient, perhaps fed by gas, electricity, or another improved system depending on the station and the year. The tower still stands in winter darkness, but the work inside it has begun to change. Progress arrives with wires, switches, motors, batteries, relays, generators, and instruction manuals that somehow manage to be both helpful and mildly insulting. You stand near the service panel or machinery cabinet, listening not for the soft breathing of a lamp, but for a hum, a very modern little hum. It seems confident, which is nice, though machines are often most confident shortly before making you regret trusting them. The storm outside remains gloriously old-fashioned. Wind, rain, spray, black water, and the rocks below have not been upgraded. The sea does not care whether the light is oil, gas, electric, or operated by an invisible committee of coastal officials. It only knows how to strike, climb, freeze, and throw salt into every crack it can find. Modern lighting may ease the keeper's body, but it does not erase the weather. It merely changes which noises wake you. A mainstream historical fact glows quietly in the room during the 20th century. Many lighthouses were gradually electrified and later automated, reducing or ending the need for resident keepers at numerous stations. Electric lamps, automatic lamp changers, photocells, radio communication, and remote monitoring changed the rhythm of lighthouse life. Some keepers no longer had to tend a flame every hour, while others became caretakers of increasingly complex equipment. Sleep improved in one sense, but worry learned new vocabulary. You check the light from the control area. The beam still turns or flashes in its assigned pattern. The lens may remain, or the station may have a more compact optic. Perhaps a lamp changer holds a spare bulb ready to swing into place if the main one fails. Perhaps batteries wait to supply power if the line goes down. Perhaps a generator crouches somewhere below, smelling of fuel and metal, ready to become the loudest roommate in the building. The tools have changed, but the question remains the same. Will the light stay on through the storm? You look at the wiring and think about salt. Salt has not retired. Salt is still ambitious. It creeps into connections, corrodes contacts, clouds fittings, stiffens hinges, and gives every metal surface a pale, crusty reminder that the ocean is never truly outside. You inspect what you can. Dryness matters, seals matter. The storm makes the tower sweat and shiver. Condensation gathers where warm air meets cold glass or metal. A keeper in this newer age may not trim a wick, but may still spend half the night protecting circuits from damp, which is less romantic but just as capable of ruining sleep. A quirky tidbit clicks with the relay. Some automatic systems were designed so that if a lamp failed, a spare bulb would rotate into position without a keeper's hand, a clever device that sounds wonderfully restful until you are lying in bed wondering whether the spare actually moved, whether the contact seated properly, and whether that tiny click you heard was salvation or a new problem applying for employment. Technology, bless it, can reduce labour while increasing the number of things you can imagine going wrong. The wind surges and the lights in the lower room flicker. You freeze, the beam above continues, but the moment stretches, Another flicker, then steadiness returns. Your heart does not immediately accept this reassurance. It would like paperwork. You rise and check the backup. Batteries ready, generator prepared, and fuel sufficient. Cables secure, switches in correct position. You feel a familiar old rhythm inside the new routine check. Confirm, record, breathe. The materials have changed, but the keeper's mind still travels the same path toward rest. Historians still argue whether automation represented liberation for lighthouse keepers, loss of a skilled way of life, or both at once. Standing in a storm-shaken tower with one hand near a switch and one ear on the wind, you understand why the debate refuses to behave neatly. Fewer climbs, fewer dangerous lantern checks, fewer sleepless nights spent nursing a smoky flame. That is real mercy. But the keeper's craft, the intimate knowledge of flame, glass, weather, and sound, begins to fade when the tower no longer needs a resident human in the same way. The bed may become quieter, the old purpose may become lonelier. Radio changes the feeling too. A voice can reach farther than a shout. Weather reports can arrive from beyond the horizon. A fault may be reported. A supply delay can be explained rather than guessed. Communication eases isolation, but it also brings a new kind of alertness. Messages may arrive at inconvenient hours. Orders may change. Static may interrupt. A storm can still damage aerials or lines. The outside world is closer, but not always clearer. Sometimes the radio spits, crackles, and offers a sentence so broken that even the wind seems better at conversation. You sit at the table beside a newer log, perhaps printed forms replacing older handwritten pages, though the handwriting still leans when the night is rough. Light operating normally as power flicker observed, backup checked, wind severe, sea high. The language is modern, but its plainness belongs to every era. The logbook remains the keeper's way of turning anxiety into entries. Fear becomes a note becomes evidence becomes permission, cautious but useful, to lie down again in the sleeping room. Modern comforts may have improved things, a better stove, a proper bed, perhaps insulation, perhaps a telephone or radio nearby, perhaps an electric light in the room, bright at the pull of a switch. It all helps, and you're grateful, still sceptical. When the storm strikes hard enough, the old sensations return. The tower hums, the glass trembles, the sea surrounds the station. The body remembers that stone and steel are strong, but not magical. Modernity is a fine blanket, but winter can still tug at the edge. You stretch out, not fully relaxed, but less burdened by constant lamp care. The quiet is different now. Instead of flame sounds, you listen for absence. Is the motor still running? Is the hum steady? Did the beacon flash at the right interval? Did the power settle? The old keeper listened for too much noise. The modern keeper sometimes listens for too little. Silence, in a machine room, can be rude. A gust lashes rain across the window. The electric bulb in the room glows steadily. You stare at it for a while. This small domestic miracle that lets you see without striking a match. Then you imagine the larger light above, brilliant and automatic, sending its pattern across water without needing your hands every few minutes. You feel relief, and something almost like being replaced. It is not jealousy exactly, more a strange tenderness for the old labour, now fading into memory while the storm remains perfectly current. The sea booms again, unimpressed by human invention. You smile despite yourself. Of course, you let people electrify towers, automate signals, build radios, install alarms, and write confident maintenance manuals. The storm will still arrive in winter with the same enormous lack of manners. It will still test windows, doors, wires, nerves, and sleep. You turn onto your side. The backup is checked. The light is working. The records are marked. Modern systems stand guard with their hums and switches, and old instincts stand guard behind your eyes. Sleep comes more easily. Perhaps, but not carelessly. It comes as a thinner worry, a softer duty, a newer kind of trust. Above you, the beacon shines through the gale, not hand-fed by flame now, but still carrying the same human message into the dark water. There is danger here, and someone, somewhere, has tried to make it known. Morning does not arrive all at once. It gathers slowly. Grey at first, then silver along the edges of the torn clouds. The storm still moves outside, but its strength has changed. It no longer sounds like an army at the walls. It sounds like an exhausted giant dragging furniture across the sky. Wind continues to shove at the tower. Rain still sweeps in bands, and the sea below remains swollen and furious. But some secret hinge in the night has turned. The worst force has passed. You notice it first in your body. Your shoulders lower before your thoughts explain why. Your hands unclench around the cup. The sounds separate more clearly now. Waves, wind, rain, mechanism, breath. The tower no longer seems to be holding itself against one endless blow. It is simply standing in bad weather, which, after the hours behind you, feels almost relaxed. Standards have shifted. A morning that would alarm a village has become, for you, a gentle improvement. Congratulations. You have been trained by misery. You climb once more, slower than earlier. The tiredness of the whole night sitting in your knees. The stairwell smells of damp stone and oil, and every step feels familiar enough to be almost comforting. At the lantern room, the light still burns or shines according to its age and apparatus. The glass is streaked with salt, the frames are wet, the metal fittings are cold and filmed with spray. But the essential fact remains: the light has stayed alive through the gale. A mainstream historical fact rests in the pale dawn after severe storms. Lighthouse keepers inspected lantern glass, lenses, roofs, galleries, doors, paths, fuel stores, boats, landing stages, and surrounding rocks for damage. The morning after a gale was not a holiday. It was an accounting. The night had spent its violence, and now the keeper had to read the bill. You look outward. The sea is a field of broken white, still heaving against the rocks. Foam clings to ledges where it should not be. Weed hangs from railings or stonework, thrown high by the waves. Pebbles may have been shifted. A path may be buried under shingle. A landing place may have lost a plank or iron ring. If the lighthouse stands on an exposed rock, the scene below can look as if the ocean spent the night trying to unpack the entire seabed at your doorstep. A quirky tidbit brightens the weary inspection keepers sometimes found surprising storm gifts after violent weather, including fish, seaweed, driftwood, broken cargo, and odd bits of ships washed or thrown into places that seemed impossible. The sea has a habit of returning property without labels. It may leave a crate, a plank, a boot, or a bewildered fish on a gallery and expect you to appreciate the delivery. Very thoughtful. Ocean. Next time, perhaps send biscuits. You check the panes carefully. A scratch here. Salt crust there. No serious crack. That brings relief so plain it does not need poetry. You wipe what can be wiped and make note of what will need proper cleaning when the weather allows. Salt dries into a cloudy veil that can dull the light. Every surface must eventually be restored. The storm may have ended its attack, but it has left fingerprints everywhere. The lens needs attention. The lamp or bulb needs checking. The mechanism needs listening. You inspect fuel levels, contacts, vents, weights, bearings, or whatever your particular station demands. Nothing can be assumed simply because the night is over. In a lighthouse, survival is followed by maintenance, which is less dramatic but more useful. A heroic pose on the gallery will not clean the glass. Also, in this wind, a heroic pose may become an embarrassing crouch almost immediately. Historians still argue whether lighthouse keepers remembered the end of storms mainly as relief, fatigue, pride, or renewed dread of repairs and reports. You feel all of it at once, relief because the tower stands, fatigue because your sleep was torn into scraps, pride because the light did not fail, dread because there are wet floors, salt-coated panes, damaged fittings, delayed supplies, and a logbook waiting to be completed with all the enthusiasm of a tax collector in boots. You descend and open the lower door when it is safe enough, slowly, bracing against the wind that still wants to make a dramatic entrance. Cold air rushes in, carrying the smell of torn seaweed and wet rock. The world outside is pale and raw, the sky hangs low, the path is slick, the horizon is a blur of moving grey. You step only where footing is certain, keeping one hand near the wall or rail. No one survives a storm night just to do something foolish at breakfast. Damage reveals itself in small discoveries. A shutter bent, a hinge strained, a barrel shifted, a coil of rope soaked through, a patch of mortar loosened, a water channel clogged with weed. None of these may be grand enough for legend, but each must be dealt with. The keeper's mourning is a list growing longer with every glance. The storm has gone from enemy to administrator, leaving paperwork in the form of broken things. Inside again you write, time of gale easing, light maintained, heavy seas, salt on lantern glass, minor damage observed. The logbook receives the night without drama, does not show the cold in your hands, the sudden fears, the broken sleep, the half-heard sounds, the kettle's steam, the child's breathing, the ghost that became a tool handle, the relief when a frame held it. It holds facts, and facts are enough for official memory. The rest stays in your body for a while. Now comes the answer hidden in all these hours. How did lighthouse keepers sleep during violent winter storms? Poorly, often, briefly, carefully, in clothes or half-dressed, between lamp checks, weather notes, repairs, and listening. They slept with boots ready, lanterns nearby, and one ear given to the tower. They slept after making rounds, securing doors, tending flames, winding mechanisms, warming food, checking family, reading instruments, and deciding which noises were safe enough to ignore. They did not sleep because the storm was quiet. They slept because the work had been done for the moment, and the body took what it could. You sit on the bunk at last, morning grey on the wall, blanket around your shoulders. The light above is no longer fighting total darkness, but it still matters in the murk. The storm has not become gentle. It has simply lost its highest anger. Your eyelids grow heavy with the strange permission of dawn. The world can be inspected again soon. Reports can be finished. Glass can be cleaned. Boots can dry by degrees. But for this small, pale hour, the tower stands, the lamp has held, and the sea has failed to climb inside. You lie down without ceremony. The bunk is still narrow. The blanket is still rough. The air is still damp. Yet now the sounds outside feel farther away, like memories already softening at the edges. You have not conquered the storm. You have outlasted its worst manners, which is more practical and much less likely to become a statue. Sleep comes at last, not deep and luxurious, but earned. It settles over you while dawn spreads thinly across the lantern glass, and the lighthouse, salt-streaked and tired, keeps its watch over the restless water. The morning softens. The wind moves more slowly now, as if it too has grown tired of its own loud opinions. Rain fades into a fine mist on the glass. The sea still rolls and breathes below, but its blows no longer feel personal. They come and go with a lower rhythm, like a great animal settling back into sleep. You rest inside the tower, wrapped in wool and dim light. The stairs are quiet for the moment. The tools wait where they belong. The cup is clean. The boots lean near the stove, damp but loyal. Far above, the lantern room holds its pale glow against the grey, and every pane, though salted and streaked, remains in place. There is nothing more to solve right now. The storm has taken its turns. The tower has answered. The keeper has climbed, listened, written, warmed, tightened, wiped, and watched. Now the body is allowed to become heavy. The mind can loosen its grip on every sound. A creak is only a creak. A wave is only water finding rock. The wind around the wall is only air passing by, no longer a warning, only a long, low note. You breathe in, you breathe out. The blanket rises and falls. The room holds steady. Somewhere beyond the coast, ships move through morning haze, guided by memory, charts, and the light that remained awake while the world was dark. You do not need to follow them. You do not need to listen for every distant sound. The tower has done enough. So have you. The grey light grows softer, filling the corners without hurry. The stove gives one quiet tick. The sea sighs below. Your thoughts drift like foam spreading thin across calmer water, breaking apart, becoming nothing urgent, nothing sharp, only brightness, mist, and the slow breathing of stone. Rest now. The lighthouse keeps watch. Sweet dreams.